Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan Chevalier, the CEO of Charity Digital, and I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about our data journey. When I originally envisaged this session, I thought it was going to focus mainly on our journey over the last 12 months. But when I came to dig into the detail, I realized that there was what I think is a more interesting story, actually, if I talk about what has happened over the 3 years since I joined Charity Digital. Because over that time, there's really been quite a significant transformation in the organization, and data's played a huge role in enabling that transformation to take place. So what I want to do is really give you a feel of that today and how that went, what we did, and what we've achieved. So I'm going to focus on 3 things in particular. First of all, the role of data in supporting Charity Digital's transformation. And in particular, one of the key tools for surfacing that data has actually been the use of OKRs, or objectives and key results. Secondly, I'm going to talk about our decision to move to a much more data-rich platform for all of our publishing activities. And then I want to share with you some of our key learnings from those 3 years. Now, this is really very much a practical session. I'm not a data scientist. I'm not a data architecture expert. So this is really going to be quite light on theory and really focus on practical approaches that we use within Charity Digital that we found worked. And I guess the whole backdrop for this really is, we are a charity ourselves, so we want to use data to help us increase our impact. And like every charity, we have our own sustainability challenges. So we want to use data to ensure that we're able to make ourselves sustainable, get the right level of income so we can keep delivering the impact that we want to deliver. So I'm going to start by sharing some quick facts about Charity Digital. So we've been running now for about 20 years. We were founded in 2001. And our mission is to help other charities to be more digital and to increase their impact by doing that. And we run 2 key programs. The first, which is our longest running program, goes all the way back to the early noughties, actually, is providing discounted technology. So this is a whole range of offers which can have up to 95% off the cost, the retail cost. So these are from big providers like Microsoft, Adobe, Zoom, AWS. We also track a number of free of charge offers from the likes of Google, Salesforce, and Canva. And we provide links to all of those from our site as well. Our other program is educating the sector about how to use digital better, so how they can actually increase their impact and how they can be more sustainable through the use of digital. In terms of size, we're now 19 people and we have about £2 million of income. So let's start the story from when I joined Charity Digital 3 years ago. We were actually known as Tech Trust back then, and mostly known for the discounted technology program, which I've just mentioned. That was branded TT Exchange, and it actually accounted for about 75% of our income at that point. And a large part of our participation in that came through being part of the TechSoup Global Network. So there are other organizations similar to us in other countries who are part of this network who also provide these discounted and donated technology offers. At that point, we had £2 million of income, so very similar to today, but actually only about 13 employees. And our education and information program was delivered under the Charity Digital News brand. It was generating about £60,000 of sponsorship, which meant that it was basically loss-making, and it was heavily subsidized by surplus income that was generated from the TT Exchange program. The problem as I joined was that we were actually expecting to lose a lot of the income from the exchange program, as Microsoft, who are the biggest part of that program, had notified that they were taking a number of products off the program. They were changing some of the rules as well. So there was a real strategic imperative to address that drop to ensure that we were sustainable. And that forecast drop did actually happen in the succeeding year. So in the year I joined, there was a 40% decline in the income of our exchange program. So what we needed to do was we needed to both increase the income and the impact that was coming through the Charity Digital News program. We needed to manage what was a think a fairly messy branding challenge. You know, we had Tech Trust, we had TT Exchange, we had TechSoup, with Charity Digital News. And just to give you a measure of scale, at this point, Charity Digital News had about 150,000 users per annum and 67,000 page views. And in terms of engagement time, we estimate it was about 14,000 hours of engagement time with that content. So let's fast forward 3 years. So as I said earlier on, we're still a £2 million organisation, but the exchange programme has now declined to where it's just 45% of our income. So it's still an important part of what we do, but it's no longer kind of dominating everything else. We've rebranded everything as Charity Digital. So we've kind of got rid of a lot of that previous messiness of TT, Tech Trust and Charity Digital News. Events are now a really big thing of what we did. So when I joined, we didn't really do any events. What you can see in the top left of this photo, this slide, is a photo of our last physical event. This was our 2020 Be More Digital conference, which we ran at the London Olympia Conference Centre. We still do written articles, which was basically all that Charity Digital News used to do, but we now run a very active webinar program. So last year we had 29 webinars that were delivered, 38 podcasts, and 3 more Be More Digital virtual events last year. And those Be More Digital virtual events actually had about 2,500 live participants, and actually they were all recorded and all that content was made available as recordings after the event, so it will have been consumed by considerably more than that in total. So to give you a sense of the change that meant in engagement, we moved from, in 2017-18, about 150,000 users to over 350,000 users in the last year. So this is the year that closed in March 2021. We moved from about 2/3 page views to over 2 million page views and 14,000 engagement hours to over 40,000 engagement hours. And that is actually quite an underestimate, because some of our content, like our podcasts, we don't have a way of actually, we can measure how many people consume them, but we don't know how much time they consume it for. So the number will be considerably higher. So you can see a really significant change over that time period. And the use of data has been really vital in actually supporting that change, that journey. So what I'm going to do is actually share with you some of those approaches that we used to data over that time period and how we've evolved as well. But I'll just give you a sense of where we were in terms of data in 2018-19 when I joined. So I'd say the profit and loss was the only regular source of management information, and that was generally lagging. So I wouldn't actually see any income and cost figures till maybe a month after. So we'd see the April figures, might see at the end of May or early June. There were some reasonable niche systems. So the exchange program, there was quite a nice system based on click, which allowed slicing and dicing of data there. Website statistics were being generated from Google Analytics. We had email delivery, open click-throughs from our .digital system. But I think a major shortcoming was there was no real systematic data tracking. So people kind of went off and looked at data if they wanted to kind of see how something was running, if they had a question in their mind, but there was no systematic looking at it, reviewing at it, understanding where things were going wrong, and then taking action to address those. Hence why I call it a kind of a data light organization. So the first thing I did to actually address this was to introduce objectives and key results. I can't really claim all the glory for dreaming this up as an idea. Obviously, the idea has been around for quite a number of years, originated by Google, I believe. It was suggested to me by my chair, who at that time was Charles Mindenhall. Charles runs Blenheim Chalcott, who are a business accelerator. They grow lots of small businesses from startup into large successful businesses. So it was a mechanism that seemed to work for them. So I thought, yeah, let's give it a go for Charity Digital. So for those of you who aren't familiar with OKRs, this is the definition which has been produced by What Matters. So I think the key things in here: collaborative goal setting tool used by teams and individuals, and very much about how you get shared ownership of those, tracking progress, creating alignment, key points there, and that there's lots of measurability in them. So I quite like that definition, although our approach to it was really very pragmatic. So there are lots of kind of elegant theoretical ways in which you create the perfect set of OKRs. We didn't use any of those. Ours was a much more pragmatic approach. And part of the reason why you can be super pragmatic with this is you change them every quarter. That's the point. They're kind of short term, focus for the quarter. You can review and iterate on them quickly and make them better and better and address shortcomings. So this somewhat messy image on the right hand side of this slide is actually our generation 1 OKR board. So this was for Q3 2018. So that's kind of October to December 2018 in our world. So yeah, it's not very elegant. It actually got redrawn pretty soon after this by someone who's much better at drawing on whiteboards than I am. But I think the important point early on is it identified the key areas for us to focus on as an organization, both to support our current execution and support our future success. It's updated weekly. So from day one, every Monday morning, it would be updated by individual employees. And then we'd have a meeting, a stand-up meeting where we discuss what had happened in the week. You know, we talk about objectives that were doing well. We'd also talk about things that maybe weren't going so well. Now, the rudimentary design is actually quite a strength in this context as well, because it makes it both highly modifiable. So it's super easy to add in a new OKR because you just go onto the board and write it on. It also makes it highly accessible, and actually, when we were in the office, highly visible as well, because it's sitting there where everybody can see it in the room. There's obviously no automatic population of it. It is entered by employees, and they have to go off and look at the sources of that data to get it. But I don't view that as a bad thing. You know, it's good to be encouraging our employees to be engaging with the sources of the data. And I think quite quickly and growing consistently over time, we got support from more and more employees. But what I think happened is that early on, some people kind of heavily identify with this approach and jump on it and like it from day one. Other people take a bit more time to come around to it and start to identify more. But I think the key points for me in terms of what this did to us from a really early stage, you know, and it's a truism, people say, you get what you measure. So here we were selecting a bundle of measures that were important to us. We were putting them there on a board for everyone to see, and we were talking about them every week. And that started to drive huge progress in terms of the execution against those measures. And in terms of what's in those measures, some are financial. There's certainly a good set of engagement statistics in there, because that was one of our key objectives. We wanted a lot more engagement in our educational content. So we were tracking user numbers, page views, bounce rate, really from the very start through this mechanism. So if we roll forward 3 years, we're still using OKRs. We've evolved our approach. In March 2020, we all had to move, like everybody else, to working from home. So having a written board in the corner of the office wasn't very helpful anymore. But it wasn't very hard to just transfer all of that into a shared Excel spreadsheet, which everyone can access. It's still updated weekly. We still review it. We now have an all hands meeting every Monday morning where we get together through a Zoom meeting and we talk about the progress on this. And we've obviously brought in other OKRs as well, as our emphasis has changed over time. But I'll talk a bit more about this later on as well. So what do I see as the benefits of this approach? So first of all, we have regular surfacing and review of data from across the organization. So the great thing here is that we can all see, you know, I can see as CEO, but everyone else can see as well what is happening across the entire organization. And that information actually comes together relatively easily because it's, the collection of it is a distributed activity. And it's interesting that we, as a result of this, we actually very rarely talk about things like total income or total costs for the organization, because we know that if we look after the OKRs at the detail level, then actually all of those cost income issues will look after themselves. And also because a lot of these are engagement focused, will actually be driving what we're meant to as a charity, which is focusing on impact. Other points here which are important. So the weekly reviews really help us create pace and momentum. Different organizations have different cadences. A development organization might be having daily stand-ups to discuss progress. That wouldn't be appropriate in our organization. But certainly when I came in, the norm was more kind of monthly management-led broadcasts of what have happened, rather than this, which is a much more interactive weekly review. The quarterly resets are really important to the OKRs as well, because we don't actually hit every OKR every quarter. They're designed to be stretching. So what we do is if we achieve an OKR too easily in one quarter, then we're actually going to move the bar up and make it harder in the next quarter. And that's great because that creates an opportunity for overachievement. And if we do badly and miss an OKR, we might bring the target down in the next quarter because we don't want the target to become irrelevant and demotivating. So that kind of that quarterly reset and enables us to do that. So the OKRs have been a really important part of our data journey so far, but there's this other aspect around our platform, and we got to the point a year in really where the OKRs were working well, but we really just didn't understand enough about our user base. So we understood our user numbers in total. We understood what type of content people were engaging with and for how long, but we really didn't understand who was engaging. And so we felt that was a real problem. We wanted to much better understand our users and actually our different user segments. And our charity digital news platform was really pretty inflexible and outdated. So we made a decision to upgrade that. And there was a big decision to make around that upgrade, because there's kind of, I think, two camps of thought around websites. There's the camp of thought which is very much the kind of the Wikipedia view, which is content should be as open as possible with as few barriers as possible to accessing resources, which means you don't have any registration on those types of sites. The problem is if there's no registration, you really can't segment your data in any way. So you can only do what we were doing on our old platform. You can only review data in aggregate. That means if you're using an email approach to tell people what's happening in your organization about new content, things that might be interesting to them, that you tend to become super spammy because you're sending everything to everybody. And there's actually quite a significant risk of cookie blocking. And I'll share with you an example later of where that happened to us. If you move into the closed or walled environment, then you say we're going to require users to register to access resources. So this has a great strength that you can now actually start to look at what type of content different users access. You can segment those users. You might segment by size of charity. You might segment by the type of activity they undertake in their charity. You might segment by role as well. And you can start to target those users much better based on their interests. You can start to be a lot less spammy because you only send people what they're interested in. And there seems to be some data that says that actually you get much higher engagement levels from this overall. And if you're aiming for impact in the way we are, getting engagement is a key step along that line to getting impact as well. So we decided to go for a closed platform. We selected a tool called Atheno. It's a commercial publishing platform that's used by lots of other publishing businesses as well. We actually migrated all of our mailing list users into this platform and set it live in February 2020. And we then invited all of our mailing list users to actually log on to the new site to confirm their registration. But we decided we didn't want to block everybody from everything if they weren't registered. So we decided that our halfway point was we'd still allow people to access 3 articles per month without being logged on or registered. But we do insist that if you come to one of our events or you attend one of our webinars, that you actually register for those. So the rapid results were that just 6 weeks after going live, we'd had 3,700 users actually register and log on to the new site. So we were super pleased with that. So we went through the year that followed. We continued with our Google Analytics reporting, but we were aware there was some reporting within Atheno at that point, and still today, I'd say it's not quite as sophisticated as what you can do in Google Analytics, although it does have this advantage of segmentation. But we did discover in the kind of October, November, December timeframe a real big issue with cookies. Our supplier decided to change the way cookies were consented to on our website, and this resulted. They did this across their customer base actually, but we were the first to implement it. This resulted in our traffic dropping dramatically because people stopped consenting to cookies. And this reduced our traffic from mid-October to December to about 20% of what it was previously. And you can kind of see this in this top line here, which is the Google Analytics reporting line. The line at the bottom is our Atheno reporting line, because we can report page views in Atheno. It still drops down in the autumn because there was that was a period in which I think across most sectors there was a drop in user engagement. But that kind of highlighted a real big issue to us in terms of actually, if you're focusing on your reporting using kind of cookie-based approaches with Google Analytics. We did actually fix the issue to a certain extent by January. We got about 60% of our traffic reporting back through Google Analytics at that stage. But we know by comparing to what we can see in Atheno that it's actually still underreported in that way. And our strategy is actually to move more and more of the reporting into Atheno. Atheno are building a suite of that out because they're aware of the issues in this area. So where are we going now? Well, over 2020-21, we continued to focus on growing the users who were on our platform, but there was quite an evolution. We recognized quite quickly once logged on users existed for us, and this was far more important for us than actually just total web traffic. Because the users who bother to log on with us are the ones who are going to engage more, ones we can build a relationship with and try and increase impact for them. So we shifted to focus a lot more on that. We also started to realize that time of engagement was a much more important metric than we'd realized before. And this was because we were running things like workshops, which we hadn't been doing much before. And if you're running a workshop, you might only have 20, 25 attendees, but if you've got them for a full day, you're going to have a really deep impact on those people. Now, we might have an article that's accessed by 1,000 people, but they only spend 4 minutes on it. So kind of like both of those have value, but how do we actually have a way of, I guess, aggregating that value? And we came to the view that actually a nice way to look at that is actually to look at total time of engagement, because that's a common metric across all forms of content and engagement. So that's what we're starting to do now as well. And just to give you a sense, we finished March 2021, so just a year after the go live on this new platform, with over 20,000 logged in users. So we've been super pleased with how that's growing, and it's one of our key objectives to keep driving that up. Our priorities for 2021-22. So we want to continue gathering data, which will help us to both drive impact, because we're about impact. So we need to kind of understand more and more about the people who are returning to us, why they're returning. For the people who maybe drop off, why are they not returning to us anymore? How do we re-engage with them? How do we get them to come back and access more content? What content do they actually need? So that type of information which we want to get from our systems is really, really important to us. And also, we have external stakeholders, we need to evidence our impact as well. So that's super important for us. I think secondly, so we've got a very rich system in Atheno. We're really only scratching the surface of what we can do in terms of user segmentation at the moment. It's going to take more time and effort for us to invest in getting into that more, but it's a real priority for us to do a lot more of that over the coming year. So, more targeting of content, more drilling down to understand people's needs better, more individual user engagement, this concept of how do we re-engage people when they drift off. And I think one other area for us to focus on more is this subject of data management. We didn't focus enough on this early on in the project. So we do now have some issues. And this is partly because of our participation in TechSoup, we have to continue to run our exchange program through a separate website. So we need to have data sharing between the Atheno website and the Charity Digital website. That isn't yet in place in the way we'd like it to be. So this year, there's going to be a lot of focus on getting more of those data management disciplines in place that are going to enable us to do that sharing. So I said I'd share something about the learnings, and these are, I think, the key points for me. So first of all, frequent reporting of important data. This concept that we drive through our OKRs, we put them on a board, be it physical or virtual, and we all talk about them every week. That just brings the frequency and the visibility up for everybody. I think this concept of user registration, I sense sometimes when I'm talking to other people in this sector that it's maybe frowned upon, what an awful thing to do. But my view is, how can we actually give people what they really need if we don't understand enough about them? And we can't do that without user registration. I'd certainly say be pragmatic in how you collect and report data. We don't have any automatic population of these dashboards, as I said. It's manually populated, but actually it kind of works fine, actually. And because we're always changing the metrics, there's a real danger if you overinvest in automation, because it's kind of like, how do you now go and change the systems to get new data that you hadn't identified before? Certainly maintaining focus on data management, I think that's important. Make sure there's a strategy for that from early on. Be iterative, so learn from your data, and our quarterly process really helps here. So each quarter we look at what's happened in the previous quarter, we reset the new OKRs. We have a slightly deeper dive at the end of each financial year as we set the broad objectives for the following year, and then those get broken down into quarters as well. And be patient on the journey. It does take time. I think if I look back, I can see that some people weren't so engaged early on in the OKR process. But if you keep at it, you keep talking about it, and actually you find the things that are important to them and how those contribute to your success, and you start to measure those and share those, then you can actually get to a point where you can get everybody engaged. So those are really the key points. I'm bang on my 30 minutes now. So what I'd like to do now is open up for questions.
Hello, thank you, Jonathan. We have had quite a few questions come in. We have a first one from an anonymous attendee saying, how did you get employees to buy into the OKR process?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, this, because I'd come from an environment, previous job I'd had been running a startup where we've been doing daily stand-ups. So I wanted to have some kind of regular get-together of the employees. We had various offsites to explore how that might work. There was quite a bit of reticence about this concept of getting everybody to speak, because if you look at things like Myers-Briggs, you see some people are introverts, some people are extroverts. The extroverts love to talk, no problem getting them to engage. The introverts are a bit more reticent. So there was this real fear of having a meeting where everybody was expected to talk. So it was kind of like, well, we're going to have the meeting. You're not going to be forced to talk, but if you've got something to talk about, then you're very welcome to do that. And then into that context, I dropped the OKR structure. And what happened was some people really loved, the extroverts probably really loved talking about their objectives and things that were happening in those areas. I think over time, the people who were more introverted, they're still proud of what they want and what they do, so they want to start talking about it as well. So just having that patience and not forcing people to talk, but just so we have a simple question for our stand-up. It's just any questions or points anybody wants to make on the OKRs. That's it. I sometimes I'll ask a few, but I don't drive that process. Anyone can ask a question. Anybody can say anything they want about it, and we just stuck with that and we're patient, and it gained momentum over time. That's one bit. I think the other bit is then the roles of individual line managers. So over time, the individual line managers have picked up more on it, and they talk to their team on an individual basis about what their individual OKRs are, and that starts to then kind of drive the rollout. So you could say we should have started with a kind of like, let's design this very elegantly and cascade it and all the rest. We didn't do any of that. We just kind of said, let's just get going, let's iterate and let's learn from it. I can't say that was wrong because it's worked for us. I think sometimes in business, in charities, we can try to over-engineer solutions, and sometimes it's just better to get going, learn and iterate.
Yeah, I think also you're never going to get it right the first time. You have to keep kind of reviewing it. So I think that kind of shows that's what you've been doing. We have another question here from Sarah, similar on OKRs. She's interested in, when you said you get what you measure, how are you choosing and evaluating your OKRs?
So they come ultimately from what are the strategic objectives of the organization. So, we had an exchange program that was kind of running fine, although we knew there was going to be a drop. So obviously because that's important, that is still sustained, we report on that. But we were trying to grow this whole other side, which was around publishing, content, engagement, events. So I was working out a set of metrics that actually supported that. So yes, we do have these user numbers on that, but as soon as we launch podcasts and webinars, it's kind of like, hey, we need to track how many people are participating in these, and because we're super passionate about the quality of those, let's actually track the feedback of the attendees at those events as well. So we dropped those in. Further along the journey, we started publishing videos. So it's kind of like, well, of course we want to know how many people are engaging with those videos, because if we don't understand how many people are engaging with them, how do we know that it's even worth doing? So it's been quite iterative, but it always links back to either impact, which is the whole engagement side, and because sustainability is important, there are a smattering of financial OKRs within that as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. This links quite nicely onto Graham's question. Do you think OKRs could work in larger organizations, or are they more aligned with smaller teams?
I totally think they can work in larger organizations. But I think you break it down. So, so we're at 19 people, we can still get everybody together once a week and talk about all the OKRs. I don't know what the number is, but there's clearly going to be a number where you just can't do that because it's too unwieldy. So it becomes, a departmental or a team OKR, and then those should be able to roll together into, what would be the organizational OKRs, which I think is probably how the likes of Google do it. They will start at the top level, of course, so there's a clear framework within which to slot departmental and team-based. But yeah, I don't think the size of the organization needs to be a barrier to doing it, but there needs to be obviously these nuances in terms of how it's implemented.
Yeah, brilliant. Another question from Sarah here, moving on to kind of the open and closed website decision. Sarah's asked, did the closed approach reduce total engagement from overall audience?
No, it didn't. Our data all says it went up. I can't directly evidence that's because it's closed, because we implemented other things at the same time. We did increase the volume of what we were publishing as well. But there's no evidence to show that it decreased engagement at all. I think, if somebody's just a one-time user, they could still come in and look at that content under the 3 articles per month without registering or logging in rule. So we don't lose any of that traffic. If you really want to access more than 3 a month, then you probably quite like what we're doing. Therefore, you're probably not going to object to registering. And if you're sensitive, and you might register once and then kind of deregister down the line because I don't want to stay on this database, and that's always an option as well, although we don't actually have lots of people deregistering.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's kind of what one of the big learnings were at the end, where it's kind of like be brave and make that decision, because it has made a difference. Got a great question here from Pauline. Are you enjoying your data journey, and what are your next steps?
Yes, yeah, very much. I'm quite although I'm not a data scientist, I'm quite a data-driven person. So I love being able to see across everything what's happening, and basically, we do our stand-up it's always under an hour. It used to be under half an hour. It's kind of grown a bit in lockdown, but we're still generally wrapped in at most 45 minutes. And for the investment of that time once a week, I can kind of, at a high level, understand everything that's happening across the organization. So I love that. In terms of next steps, it's just getting a lot cleverer in the segmentation. We can do so much more with this, and I'm really excited about what we're going to achieve as a result of that over the coming year.
Lovely. You mentioned there that you do love data. I know that, definitely. But how do you analyze your data? Question.
Yeah, so again, this is one of these interesting things, because there are obviously some great tools out there, and I've mentioned Click, and we have Click for the exchange, and it works pretty well for that. But actually, as soon as we want to get sophisticated, we nearly always end up dumping it into Excel. So I am a lover of Excel. I love pivot tables because I can just slice and dice my data in whatever way I want. So we do use that for a lot of the more ad hoc analysis, I'd stress there. So we're not just doing that kind of routinely all of the time, but it's great for when you're trying to get those deeper insights. I guess as we go down the line, at certain points we might want to invest in more automation, but I think at the moment, actually, the investment is more likely to be in things like that data management side of things, so that we get better integration of systems. That is where will be more of a priority for us in the short term.
Brilliant. Well, we have answered every question, and we have ended right on time. So hopefully Sophie's happy with us. But we do have an exhibition booth if anyone wants to come chat to us there. And thank you so much, Jonathan.
Yes, thank you very much for listening, everybody. Nice to meet you.